fastest growing podcast in the history of the known universe. And it's mostly the fastest growing because of AJ Hoffman on Thursdays, but we'll get to that. Live at Coach's Pub today on Webster in Louisiana in Midtown. Come on out. Good crew here, great food. Lots of ways to get drunk. I mean, that's all we care, right? So get your ass over here. But we'll be here until 5 today. And today's show features AJ Hoffman. And as always, and this is always the coolest show of the week. I mean, I love the Monday shows too. Don't get me wrong, but it's just we get to do old school blitz shit, and it's just fun, man. I miss this guy, and I love doing shows with him. So AJ will be here today. I want to thank everybody who's helped out on Venmo after the lawsuit thing. Which, you know what, I get that settled. And I was telling AJ before the show, I take a side job online.
This is so great.
Seems completely legit. You know, I mean, fill out HR paperwork and everything, right? And so they send me a check for my training, and it bounces. And so I ask him about it. I say, "Oh no, that check's as good as cash." I'm like, "Well, no, it's really not. Not according to the bank." And you know, and it was really, and then it started really getting sketch because I'm like, okay, the check's from Austin. And then they want me to friggin' Zelle money to buy equipment that I don't need. It's like, oh no, this is for your MacBook and printer. And I'm like, I got a MacBook, I got a printer. I don't need to buy this crap from you. And first it was $400. And I don't do it because I'm like, wait a minute, why are you sending me a check and then asking me to Zelle? This is like scam 101, bitches.
Yeah.
And then it turns into 1,000. And I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. Like,
well. So after you say no to 400, they're like, okay, you're not going to send 400. How about 1,000?
Yeah. And then they're like, well, no, you can't hide from us. No matter what you do, you can't hide from us. I'm like, I'm not hiding. You're the one who bounced the fucking check. Yeah, I'm easy to find, And by the way, I live in Texas. Please walk up my stairs. I would love that. But yeah, so great job. Total fail. But that's all right. I mean, I've got other opportunities out there, and I don't really need it right now. It's just, if I don't find something to do during the day, man, I'm just gonna fucking drink all day, and that's just not healthy. So I just wanted something to do, and it seemed too good to be true. And guess what? It was. What's going on with you, brother?
Living the dream, man. As we wrap up football season, it's a super busy but wonderful time of the year.
It is, but I start getting a little depressed here because after this week, I mean, we're kind of down to one game, and I used to do this all the time, and it's like that's the only thing you can bet on. How'd your betting go this weekend?
Not great in the NFL. This was one of my weaker weeks. I had a lot on the. Well, one thing worked. A couple things worked out. The Green Bay game, like the Green Bay to score first, Green Bay in the first quarter, knowing that they were going to get the ball, that all worked out great. What didn't was I had them over 9.5 points in the first half. They got in the red zone 3 or 4 times, and they got 6 points out of it. So a lot of marching up and down the field and then not finishing the job. And then obviously the Buffalo game, a little bit of a kick in the pants, the way that game ended. So not my best work this week, but still I'm up like 70 units on the season. I hit 64% on the pod this year, so it's been a good season. It was just a rough week.
Yeah, no, you've been amazing this year on the NFL, and yeah, Buffalo ass. I had the runs pretty heavy, but I also had San Francisco to cover. And could have been a better weekend, but I've done okay on hockey, and so hanging in there. But yeah, the NFL was not kind to me. But that's
I'm on like I'm on like a 20-5 college hoops run, so you can tell my focus is shifting. Like I only have a couple games a week. Like you can only prep so much on a game, you know what I mean? And then you start looking at the other stuff. You got what else are you working on? I've been dabbling a little bit in the NBA this year, so it's you do your work and you do the best that you can, and then you you move on to the other ways to make money.
Yeah, and I've been doing a lot of college basketball too, mostly Big 12 because, I mean, home favorites. I'm going the other way almost every game, and it's paying off. And with the only especially UH, it's like when they're at home, like they'll beat Texas Tech by 30 or whatever it was, but you go on the road and it's a 5-point game at most. And I knew they were going to struggle a little bit against BYU, but they wound up getting out with a cover, barely, which, hey, you win on the road in the Big 12. It really doesn't matter who you're playing. That's a good win.
No doubt. Yeah.
And, I was joking with all my friends. They must have thought it was White Boy Day. It wasn't White Boy Day. I love that quote. True romance, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, welcome in Jared, Zed, Pelly, Behannon. Love you guys being in. So as we look at the Final Four in the NFL, I mean, this feels really chalky to me, and that also feels very square, right? But I just think the Ravens are the best team in the league. You and I have talked about this all year. They're at home, and I know the Chiefs have been there before, but I think it was big for the Ravens to kick the crap out of the Texans, even though they weren't in their league, to get past that can't win a playoff game thing. I think they're going to be fine. I like the Ravens here quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm generally in the same boat as you, man. The Ravens have just dominated the best teams on their schedule this year, and the Chiefs haven't. Kansas City. Think about the last 2 weeks, beating the Dolphins and beating the Bills. Those are good wins, obviously, but both those teams were dealing with pretty heavy injuries to their defense. So Buffalo was without 4 starters. And then that doesn't even count guys like Teron Johnson, Rasul Douglas, Tyrell Dodson, who played and probably shouldn't have been playing, but they didn't really have an option.
Right.
Miami didn't have Xavier Howard. They didn't have Javon Holland. They didn't have Bradley Chubb. They had Jalen Ramsey and Deshaun Elliott playing banged up. I think this has kind of overvalued Kansas City offensively. They've been a middle-of-the-road offense all season long, and we're looking at the last 2 weeks when they play – they play against guys who are banged up, and suddenly it's like, oh, their offense is really coming together. I'm not sure I buy it. Now you get a Ravens team that is the healthiest they've been all season long. Marlon Humphrey's returning. He's playing for the first time since week 17. And the Chiefs are the ones who are starting to have injury issues. So on offense, Joe Thuney is the highest graded interior offensive lineman in the league when it comes to pass blocking on PFF. Like he's an all-pro. He's not going to play. And then you think about the guys on the other side of the ball for Kansas City. Willie Gay, he's the guy who the Chiefs use as a spy on running quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Now you've got the running quarterback, and you don't have that. You don't have that spy. And his backup, Cam Jones, went on IR at the end of the regular season. Now, L'Jarius Sneed, their corner, who's generally assigned to the number 1 receiver for an opponent, don't know if he's going to play. Their starting safety, Mike Edwards, he got hurt last week, and the only reason he was starting is because Brian Cook's on the IR already. So it just feels like there's a lot going wrong for this Chiefs team right now, and I mean Mark Andrews, if he comes back, the Ravens are just getting healthier. And then the other thing to consider is Mahomes. When Mahomes has the most success is these teams play a zone against him, and that's the only way they can blitz.
Right.
And Mahomes, he's going to beat the blitz, especially if you're in zone. What the Ravens can do that most teams in the NFL can't. The Ravens can man you up, especially now that they've got Marlon Humphrey back. They can man you up on the back end and get a pass rush with their front, because let's face it, the tackles for the Chiefs have not been that good this year. Now Tooney's out. Like, it's just the offensive line is a weak spot right now. And then Kyle Hamilton, who is the second best safety in the league in coverage, that's who's probably going to be taking care of Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
So where do you go? So if Marlon Humphrey is going to take away Rashee Rice, Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith are going to take away Travis Kelce, what's the offense for the Kansas City Chiefs? I don't really know. So I can only look at the Ravens here. Fezzik and I disagreed on this because I was saying, listen, with these early Ravens threes, we have to jump on. There's going to be Ravens -3. We've got to jump on.
Yeah.
And he said, don't do it. He's like, you're probably going to get down to 2.5 or a reduced 3. And I said, if the Ravens are 2.5 at home to the Kansas City Chiefs, I will bet my house. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so crazy that like everyone is terrified of Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. And I mean, I get it. The guy's very good. He's had a lot of success. He's one guy. Like,
Right.
you look at the Ravens roster next to the Chiefs roster, and it's not even close. The Ravens have the most complete roster in the NFL. And San Francisco may be in the conversation, although San Francisco's offensive line is shaky.
Without Deebo Samuel,
yeah,
to that, but without Deebo Samuel,
and this Ravens team, man, like, think about how hot the Texans were going into that game, and what the Ravens defensively did to them. Like, I think the Texans had like 40 rushing yards in the whole game. CJ Stroud was, I mean, he was. They said no, you're not doing anything to beat it. The 10 points, the Texans scored 10 points. And think about how they got them. The Ravens shanked a punt, and the Texans got a cheap field goal, and then they got a punt return touchdown. So, like, the Texans offense that had been just a fireball did absolutely nothing against his defense. And I'm going to give you a list of the top quarterbacks that the Ravens played this season. This is C.J. Stroud twice, Joe Burrow twice, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy. Those quarterbacks in 8 games, 216 yards per game passing, 6 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Their average QBR in those games was 41.2. So basically, the Ravens turned C.J. Stroud, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Tua, Joe Burrow, and Brock Purdy into Aiden O'Connell. That's what they did to them.
Yeah,
and they were 8-0 in those games, and they allowed 14.5 points per game. They have dominated the best quarterbacks they've seen all year, the best offenses they've seen all year, and I have no reason to believe other than. If you believe that, like, Patrick Mahomes, there's some sort of voodoo magic, and like or if you believe the conspiracy that the NFL wants the Chiefs in the Super Bowl because of Taylor Swift, then I'm not going to convince you. But if this is a straight played game, the Ravens are significantly better than the Chiefs, in my opinion. And so if you say the Ravens should get 2 points for home field, the idea that the Ravens on a neutral are 1.5 against these Chiefs,
no,
I can't imagine in a world where that is. You're starting to see more 4s pop up, so I think this is one of the few times where I read the market better than Fez, and like he's surprised to see that it's going to 4. I just didn't understand. I was like, I mean, it's some of these look ahead lines too. Like, I don't know if the Ravens are just madly disrespected, but it was like, if a Super Bowl matchup between the Ravens and the Lions, you can bet it right now, Ravens -4.5. Like, that's on a neutral site. The Ravens are only 4.5 points better than the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, I don't think
it's crazy. And, and I'll say this is the other thing: the Ravens in the first half have just been a juggernaut. John Harbaugh is the best ATS coach in the NFL in the first half in his career. Lamar Jackson is the best first half ATS quarterback in his career. Same goes for both. Same goes for the first quarter. They dominate the first quarter. They dominate the first half. Now, if you bet those last week against the Texans, you lost both of them because of a shanked punt that led to a free field goal, and then a kick return or a punt return touchdown. That was the difference. But the Ravens dominated the first half anyway. Like, the Texans didn't do anything in that first half except a couple special teams plays. So I like the Ravens in the first half. Probably my favorite bet this week is Ravens minus 2.5 in the first half.
I love that.
Because if there is Mahomes voodoo magic, it's going to come late. Like it did against Buffalo, quite frankly. So I haven't thought that this Chiefs team was elite all season long. I would argue that the Ravens, this version of the Ravens, is like maybe the best team in the last 3 years.
Oh yeah, agree.
And I just think that, and there is some concern that Lamar in the playoffs has not been great historically. He was pretty freaking great last week, and I think that the Chiefs, you can run on these Chiefs, and that's bad news against this Ravens team. So, especially with the injuries that they're dealing with, so it's Ravens or nothing for me. I think Lamar has a big rushing day. His prop is pretty inflated, 64.5. But I still think
Yeah.
I think I'd go over that too. But in general, I also think this game is an under game because the Chiefs have been an under team all season long.
Yeah.
And I think that there two things are playing into this being like people thinking this is going to be a high scoring game. They see what the Ravens did last week against the Texans. And we talked last week on this very show about the Texans hadn't played a good offense all season long. The only top 10 offense the Texans played all season long was the Ravens in week 1, and the Ravens lit them up. So the Texans defense isn't all that good. So the Ravens put up a big number, and the Texans metrics say, oh, they're a pretty good defense, but they were an untested defense. And then on the other side, they're looking at Kansas City and, oh, what a great offensive performance. And that was against a decimated Bills defense that was on short rest. I just think that both these offenses are overinflated in the market right now. So I think there's an under to be had. I think I'm hoping it hits 45 clean. It's 44.5 now. 45 is a pretty key number in totals. So I'd like to see it get to 45 and hit the under. But if game day comes around and it's still at 44.5, I'm going to have a piece of 44.5 too.
I agree with everything you said there in almost every bet. And the thing is, and not that I'm going to put the Texans on par with the Chiefs offensively, even though I think statistically they've been better than the Chiefs this year. But the Ravens did some subtle stuff, man. When they went man on Nico Collins and locked his ass down, but then they zoned over the middle, which pretty much took away Dalton Schultz and took away all those little running back passes they do. And the Texans had no answer. And yes, Travis than anything the Texans have. Travis Swift. I mean, his husband is the reason. That's the only reason I think they have a chance is the NFL wants his husband. But man, the Ravens are just so good at that, and they get pressure up front. And oh my God, getting Roquan Smith last year, or was it the year before? Either way, they got that guy for almost nothing, and he is a legitimate stud, and he can stop an offense by himself. Yeah. I mean, he's one of the few. No, sorry, go ahead.
Remember a couple years ago, Kyle Hamilton was a bust. It's like, this guy can't play, and now he's like one of the top safeties in the league. Like they're so well coached, they're so solid, and so I've been talking all season long about the Ravens and the Browns defenses. These are the two best defenses. The difference is the Browns they're very straightforward about what they're doing. Like they're a hammer. They come at you one way, and they've got really good players, so it generally works. The Ravens, it's like an amoeba. Like they change to what your strengths are. They're taking away your strengths and making you do something you don't want to do. And they still have all these great players. Like, I mean, freaking Jadeveon Clowney looks like a great player. Like this is it's a legit team, man. It's very hard to deal. And listen, last week was different. I'm sure that as good as Bobby Slowick is, I'm sure he saw some things that he wasn't expecting. He was probably confused by. Andy Reid's probably not going to be confused by a whole lot. Like he's been around the block enough to know. But I mean, I still think the Ravens they're going to find ways to confuse you. And the truth is, the Chiefs don't have the overwhelming offensive talent that they've had in years past, and that becomes like coaching can be like it's great. Andy Reid's a great coach. Patrick Mahomes is a great quarterback, but when they had Tyreek Hill, it was like it was an overwhelming amount of weapons for people to deal with. And I know last year they won without Tyreek Hill, and that's awesome. Like they proved that they can do it without Tyreek Hill. But last year there wasn't a team like these Ravens. There wasn't this good of a team going up against them, and I think that's just it's undervalued. And if the Baltimore Ravens, this Baltimore Ravens team, if they were all wearing New England Patriots jerseys, like no one would be saying, "Well, you can't bet against Patrick Mahomes." They'd say, "No, you can't bet against Bill Belichick here."
Right.
The truth is, the Ravens are just that much better right now than these Chiefs. And if I'm wrong, there'll be egg on my face, and I'll have been the idiot who bet against Patrick Mahomes 2 weeks in a row, and maybe that'll be me. But I'm still not buying it.
I'll be the other one.
I think the Ravens are probably 2.5 points better than the Bills on a neutral, and the Bills were just favored by almost 3 against these Chiefs. So there's levels to it. I have to take the Ravens this week.
Like I said, I couldn't agree more. And here's the other thing, and I'm glad you brought up the Patriots, because you talked about how the Ravens defense has been this year. This is old school Patriots, where they would take away your best players and make you beat them another way. And that's what the Ravens have done all year. And they've done an amazing job of it. And, and the thing is, the Chiefs, and again, not to compare the Texans, Nico Collins is better than Rice. They took him out of it. I mean, Kelsey's the one guy, but all year long, people have figured out ways to keep Travis Kelce under control. So you don't think the Ravens are going to do it? And, man, if Mark Andrews is back, just bend over, Chiefs. You're about to get greased.
Yeah. I mean, I just think there's too many paths for, like, I think the Ravens are better on offense and defense than the Chiefs. And if there was some edge that I saw, and even after last week, where like I just talked about, the Ravens basically gave the Texans all 10 of their points because of special teams mistakes. The Ravens still have an elite special teams. They've got the best kicker in the history of the world.
They just had a bad game. They just had a bad game. So that happens.
Yes. So when you're better in all 3 phases, like how is that? It's all mystique. It's all, well, Patrick Mahomes doesn't lose these games. And I mean, listen, Tom Brady won a bunch of Super Bowls. He also lost a lot of AFC Championship games. Like it happens. Like these guys, like when they're in the game, when they're in the Super Bowl, it's hard to pick against them, certainly. But Tom Brady lost Super Bowls. Like it happens.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes is not like this perfect being. Like he's. I think this is going to be.
You can get in his head. I mean, he's great, but nobody's immune.
Yep. And listen, I'm not gonna buy into. Well, you can't bet against Patrick Mahomes. It sounds so much to me like you can't bet against Brady, and there's sometimes you can. And if there's you can't pick one guy over an entire team. That's not how the NFL works. Especially like Lamar Jackson's been so damn good this year as well. Like Lamar Jackson's probably gonna be the MVP, and
he
no one is gonna. So let's say hypothetically Lamar Jackson's gonna be the MVP. And we're still willing to say the Chiefs are better at quarterback than the Ravens. So let's just say Chiefs, if you put a check mark on the quarterbacks, put it by the Chiefs. That's fine, even though the Ravens probably have the MVP at quarterback. Where else are you putting those check marks for the Chiefs? Like, there's
here's the other one. I mean, everybody says Andy Reid this, Andy Reid that. I don't know. I don't think check for the Chiefs.
I don't think so either. I think John Harbaugh. I think he's maybe the most underrated coach in the NFL. I think without question he's a top 5 head coach in the NFL. So I don't know, man. I think that there's biases that make people, and I will say the whole Taylor Swift NFL thing, like the way they've used these officials, like the officials they're assigning. There was a guy Sean Hockley, who reffed the Bills game last week.
Right.
He had reffed 10 Chiefs games and 4 Bills games. And the Chiefs were 8-2 in those games, which sounds about right. They probably win 80% of their games anyway. And the 4 Bills games, they were 1-3.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's an anomaly. But then you look at the penalty yards, and it was like 120 penalty yards difference, even though the Chiefs play 6 more games. So it's like and all the NFL does is they can assign a referee or a referee crew and say they don't have to tell the ref like, hey, here's what we want to happen. They can just assign a crew that they think will officiate the way that they want the game officiated. And does it make sense for the NFL to want the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl? Absolutely. I'll tell you this. My wife sat down on the couch with me and watched the entire Chiefs-Bills game. You know why? Because she listens to the Kelsey Brothers podcast every week. She's become a fan of Travis Kelce, and she loves Taylor Swift. So they're like, she is now invested in a way that she would never be invested before. I can't imagine my wife's the only one. There's a bunch of people watching football now that like Taylor Swift fans that weren't watching football before, and now like my wife's on a Reddit thread where people are asking questions about football, Swift fans asking questions about football, trying to learn. Of course the NFL would love that.
Yeah.
But do I also think that it's going to be like it's going to just be some absurdly lopsided? I mean, that's what it would take to me, is absurdly lopsided officiating. And by the way, I don't think that was the case in the Buffalo game. Did I think that the Chiefs got some calls that they probably shouldn't have? Yes. But I think the Chiefs won because the Bills made some dumb decisions. I don't think officials cost the Bills the game, and I don't think they'll be able to cost the Ravens the game. I just think this team's too solid.
Yeah, and we both may be wrong on this, but this is one of the few times where I've agreed with you 100% on everything about this football game. And we usually have a few differences there, but no, I'm with you. I honestly. I would take the Ravens to win the Super Bowl right now if I could get it a good enough price. But couple things. Hugh Dab says his wife and his mother-in-law, same way. King of all Twitches, same wife and daughter. But, I mean, that makes sense, right? And that's why whenever you see highlights, they're showing Taylor Swift dancing in the suite. I mean, this is a transcendental thing for them in terms of media. I mean, she is a very, very different animal. And
I mean, she's a bigger star than anybody in the NFL will ever be. That's like, it's just hard
absolutely.
Yeah.
But, as far as just on the field, the Ravens are just better. And, you and I have talked about them all year. We both thought they were the best team in football from the beginning. They've done nothing to change my opinion of that. And,
well, if anything, if it was a question, the 49ers kind of have declined to the point where it's not a question anymore in my mind. Like, I think the Ravens are probably a full point better than the 49ers now. And if I said all year long the Ravens are the best team, and someone said, no, 49ers are the best team, I'll hear that argument. Like, I'm not going to fight against you. Because I can see it. I can see you saying the 49ers are the best team. Right now, you look at all the you look at all the injuries for the 49ers. You look at the offensive line for the 49ers. It's not close. The Ravens are a better team right now. The Ravens are the best team right now.
Well, and we'll get to the 49ers in a minute, but like I was saying earlier, it's like, to me, the two most important 49ers, they're not Christian McCaffrey, they're not Brock Purdy, it's Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams. Because when those guys have been out, that's a very average football team. And you could see it when Deebo went out last week. That offense wasn't the same, because he's a guy that you throw the ball 5 yards and he takes it 40. He extends drives. He makes plays. He makes Brock Purdy look like an MVP candidate. And I mean, and look, Ayuk's a good receiver. They've got other good receivers. George Kittle's a really good player, but Debo's a difference maker, and there's just not a
Yep.
lot of those. And without him, I think they're vulnerable. And when we get to talking about them and the Lions, I mean, I think that's going to be one of the keys because they need that guy.
Yep.
All right, so we're talking about Harbaugh's before we move on to that.
Okay.
I think San Diego just made the hire that's
Fred, it's LA now. Let's get it right. It's LA.
Mama called him San Diego. I'm going to call him San Diego. Okay, it's 2 movie references already. No, yeah, sorry, Chargers. I love this fucking hire. I'm not going to lie. I think this is a guy who's going to go in there. Tell me we're arguing. Come on.
No, we're not arguing. This is the I didn't think it was going to happen, honestly, because I didn't think that the Chargers were going to pay up. We talked about Spanos before.
We talked about that last week, how cheap these bastards are. So
yeah,
they're going to let them hire assistants. Yeah.
Yep. So there's some good things happening for the Chargers. And I don't know. I'm sure they're going to go after Todd Monken as their OC. So he's trying to make some moves. And I knew when Harbaugh everybody was like, he's going to stay at Michigan. I was like, dude, this guy, if he were staying at Michigan, he'd be recruiting right now. He wouldn't be taking interviews with the Chargers and the Falcons and then taking a second interview. Like, you don't do that if you're going back. Like, once he started taking these interviews, especially once he started taking multiple interviews, I said, there's no way he's going back.
Yeah.
And I think what he did was, by winning that title at Michigan, Michigan fan can't even be mad that he left. Like, they're just like, yeah, I get it. I mean, he won them. They're going to build him a statue.
Yeah.
Like, most guys, when they leave, like, everybody's pissed off. Oh, I can't believe he's leaving us. It's like, no, he did something that no one else has been able to do in forever. That, like, Michigan fan can't be mad at that.
Right.
He left on, I think, the best terms possible. And I think listen, it's so much easier for these guys. Like, if you care about recruiting and like you want to get the best players, and I think that, you know, you can be a really good college coach. I think Jim Harbaugh doesn't want to deal with that aspect of it. I think he just wants to coach football, and this is an opportunity to do that. He accomplished what he wanted to do, and now he's coming back. I think he wants to have a national championship and a Super Bowl ring. I think he wants to join that club, and I also think this is the most, like, this it almost exactly mirrors Pete Carroll leaving USC. The water's getting hot at Michigan, Fred. They did some shit that they weren't supposed to be doing. And, like, all it did was they pulled back the blanket a little bit and a couple cockroaches ran out. You know, when they move the whole couch, what's going to happen? They're just going to come swarming out. Jim Harbaugh doesn't want to be there when that happens. He doesn't want to be there for the swarm of cockroaches.
Yeah,
and it was the smartest thing.
Shit in the corner and all that stuff. Yeah.
It was the smartest thing Pete Carroll did, was to get away when he was still clean, and USC had to deal with some shit, you know, that would have fallen on him. He didn't have to deal with it. Jim Harbaugh, if Michigan has to deal with some shit, that's their problem. But guess what? Again, is Michigan fan going to be mad they've got to clean up Jim Harbaugh's mess? No, because he won him a national title. Like, I asked this question. You tell me what you think. If Jim Harbaugh had lost in the national championship game, would he be leaving Michigan right now?
I don't think so. I think he's one of those driven guys, and this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to win a national championship, and he wants to win a Super Bowl. And he came so close to winning a Super Bowl already. And you know what? I admire the fuck out of that. That's, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too many people who just want to get paid and, you know, don't want to put the effort in and say, oh, well, fuck, I'm rich now. I don't need to do anything. And you know what? It's funny. I had Lawyer Dave on Monday, who's obviously a huge Michigan fan. And he kind of feels exactly what you're talking about. It's like, hey, he won us a national championship. I will. If he goes to San Diego, I'll root for his ass. Sorry, Los
Yep.
Angeles. God damn it, I keep saying that.
Thank you.
But yeah, I know. But it's But I agree with that, and I like the guy. He's kind of a dick, but I like him as a coach. You can't be a great coach without being a little bit of a dick. I'm trying to think of one guy, like even Andy Reid's got some dick in him, right? Nobody's completely friendly all the time, but this guy can coach, and he's gonna all those little things that the Chargers did that were so awful. He's gonna fix 80% of them.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you get late in games, they're not going to blow games late every time with this guy as head coach. And and if I'm a fantasy guy, which I am, boy, I'm investing in an Austin Eckler a lot next year. I mean, they're going to run the football, and and they're going to protect Justin Herbert and keep him from throwing the picks and making the mistakes he makes. Those are all things. Look what he did with Alex freaking man. I mean, this guy can coach. I'm excited.
Colin Kaepernick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This is
Oh no, he's the greatest player ever and deserves another chance, AJ.
the reason, and I said this, when all these openings happened, this Chargers opening was by far the best because they're the only one of all the jobs that opened up. They're the only one that had a good quarterback situation, and obviously this was a hugely disappointing season for the Chargers. I think it was a hugely disappointing season for Justin Herbert, obviously, but I mean, the upside that he has is like you can't even touch it with these other jobs that were open. Think about it: New England, Carolina, Atlanta, Seattle. None of them have a quarterback situation that's even good. Tennessee, it's just they're bad quarterback situations, and this was the one job that stuck out as like, man, this is the best available job. And they got the best available coach. I think the crazy thing to think about is we're running out of openings. The Falcons hired Raheem Morris today, which is great news for the Texans. If you want to keep Bobby Slowick, but that they're down to there's 2 job openings now in the NFL. There's 2 left because Carolina hired someone, so now it's Washington and Seattle are the only 2 jobs left. Mike Vrabel and Bill Belichick are still out there.
And Pete Carroll.
I mean, and Pete Carroll, yeah. Although, I don't know. Pete Carroll, we still don't know if he's going to be involved with Seattle in some way that's not head coach. I don't know what they're going to do with him.
He wants to coach. It's just no one's been interested. And maybe it's an age thing, but that's bullshit.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
But that guy is still sharp as a tack and in fantastic shape and takes care of himself and is still a damn good coach. But the Belichick Atlanta thing never really made sense because they have no quarterback. And
well, it also didn't make sense because, and this is what I said about Belichick, he's going to want control. He's not going to go to a team where they say, and this is why Seattle won't fit for Belichick, because Seattle's come out and said, whoever the next coach is, John Schneider, that coach reports to John Schneider, the GM. Bill Belichick's not reporting to some GM. That's not going to happen. Yeah. Bill Belichick probably wants to be the GM. And if not the GM in name, he wants to have the GM duties when it comes to building the roster. So if a team's not willing to give them that, which Pete Carroll didn't have to ask John Schneider's permission.
No.
He went straight to the owner. But they said the next coach, it's not going to be that way. So if it's not going to be that way, that counts Belichick out. So I'm just shocked I'm more shocked that Mike Vrabel's not hired somewhere, because I think Mike Vrabel's more flexible. But the Bill Belichick thing is it's difficult to find a team who's willing to basically let this one guy take over their entire franchise. And I will say, if there's any franchise right now that might be in that mode, it's Washington, because they've been such a mess that they've done a full house cleaning. Maybe now's the time to say, hey, if you can give us 5 years, you've got the reins here, and try and make this thing respectable in the next 5 years. But again, is it Sam Howell? I don't know. I don't think it's Sam Howell, but you got to find somebody. And one thing we've seen is outside of Tom Brady, the quarterbacks that Belichick has found have been good, not great. and like Belichick's found he's found a bunch of really good backup quarterbacks. The Jacoby Brissett's and
Right.
Mac, Brian Hoyers and probably even Mac Jones and Jimmy Garoppolo is probably the best of the bunch outside of Brady that he's found. But he's found one guy that can be a franchise quarterback. He'd have to find another one to even get close to turning Washington around.
Yeah, and listen, I like Howell, but that's not a guy that's. I mean, he's like a kind of glorified Matt Schaub. I mean, he can put up
Yeah.
numbers, and he's not horrible, but he's not a guy that's ever going to lead you anywhere unless the rest of your team is dynamic. Which is why I love the Harbaugh to LA thing, because they have the dynamic players, and he's the kind of guy that if you have that, he can win with any quarterback almost, and he's actually got a really good one. And that's why I think that was the best job. Pete Carroll wanted it. We saw that story come out this week, and they just weren't interested. And I would probably rather have Harbaugh over Carroll at this point of their career.
I would too. I would too. I mean, how many more years does Pete Carroll have? I don't know. But
more than me.
Yeah. Harbaugh was like he was the prize, I think, of it, even over Belichick, because with Belichick comes a lot of other shit. I've said I think that if I had my druthers, I would want Harbaugh first, and then I think Mike Vrabel's probably next best available, and then probably Belichick or Carroll. I mean, I'd personally prefer Pete Carroll. If I were in charge of a team, I wouldn't want Bill Belichick, even with the upside. I don't want to deal with someone like him. But I also understand if a team is like, hey, we want to establish an identity, it's a good way to go. It's just not the way I would want to go. The rest of these guys, they're all interchangeable. Like, Brian Callahan, I don't know. Like, I don't know if Brian Callahan's any good. He's had Joe Burrow. Yeah, he's looked pretty good. Yeah. I mean, Joe Burrow make a lot of guys look good.
How many guys had Tom Brady and made them look good?
Yeah. Do we think like Todd Bowles is like a genius coach all of a sudden? No. Like Todd Bowles was looked at as like one of the dumbest coaches in the league, and now it's like all of a sudden. I mean, well, I don't know. I'll just say this. I think that the other coaching hires outside of this one, the Harbaugh one, are just kind of they're at least right now to me they're just guys. So
yeah,
I like Raheem Morris. Do I think Raheem Morris is going to turn around the Atlanta Falcons? I kind of doubt it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, we've seen what Raheem Morris is. I mean, I don't see that working out. And I don't know anything about it other than like I said, he's had Joe Burrow, Jose. So I don't know what he's going to do there. I just and that's the thing with a lot of these coaching searches. But the ones who, when you hit the home run, and I'll say this, the Texans hit the home run with DeMeco Ryans. It's still guesswork. You did not know what he was going to be. I mean, you're guessing this guy can come in and turn the team around. And maybe Raheem Morris does that, but I've kind of seen Raheem Morris's act, and I know what he is. It's just like Todd Bowles. I mean, I think they're good coaches, but is that a guy that's going to take me to the Super Bowl? I don't think so.
I don't know. Like Dave Canales, because he gave Baker Mayfield a good season. Is he suddenly like going to fix Carolina? I don't know. What do we know that Gerard Mayo is anything more than like going to do exactly what Bill Belichick was doing? I'm not sure.
But what do we really know about him other than his name has come up the last few years and nobody hired him? Maybe
that's it.
Maybe he just tries to be Belichick. Maybe he's Bill O'Brien light. I don't know. But those are things that when you make those hires, sometimes you get it right. Most of the time you get it wrong when it's,
And that's why it's fascinating that guys like Mike Vrabel, who's got a track record now, Pete Carroll, who's got a track record, Bill Belichick, who's got a track record, Brian Flores, who's got a track record of success.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for
those
bringing
guys
him
are
up. No, that's a guy whose name has not come up for a single freaking job, and it should have.
It's crazy. Like if I were to make a list of like if I could have any coach in the whole world be my head coach, I don't think I'd get to 15 names before I'd get to his, and no one seems interested in him. And so it's weird that there's people who are like, okay, well, we'll take a chance with this guy, this unproven guy, Antonio Pierce. We're gonna roll with that. We're gonna go with Dave Canales. Like those things surprise me when there's guys who are like none of these hires, other than Harbaugh, are guys who have a track record of success, like
Right.
as a head coach. It's all like kind of a dice roll, and I really think what this goes back to is the guy who ruined this for everybody, or I guess made it where all these guys can get hired like this now, is Sean McVay. The Rams took a chance on a young guy that they thought was a hot commodity, and it panned out. I think Sean McVay is a special guy, like because we've seen a bunch of other teams try and do the same thing, and it hasn't worked. We saw Brandon Staley, didn't work. We saw Frank Reich, didn't work.
Mike McDaniel's worked out, but that's another one, right? Where,
yeah, but it's. I mean, it's.
But we're
they're
talking
rare.
2
Like
out of
it's
10,
it's a
man.
coin flip.
Yeah.
It's a coin flip.
Well, and as much as I like Robert Saleh because he's one of my people, I mean,
Not working out.
Jury's still out on him, right? Right now, there's a down arrow. I mean,
For sure.
And you know, and here's another name, and it's funny because we were talking about this earlier, and I wanted to bring it up then, and then we got into some other stuff. But why has Monken's name never come up for one of these jobs? I know it's only 1 year, but what he has done with this offense and what he's done throughout his career, by the way, he's been very successful. Why is he not being interviewed?
I don't know. I've always thought maybe he didn't want to be a head coach, but I don't know.
I think all these guys want to be head coaches.
Maybe
that's just. I think that's just natural.
But I think there's some guys who realize, like, so the Vic Fangio move, like Vic Fangio, he and the Dolphins basically agreeing mutually to part ways because he wanted to be closer to home. And the assumption is Vic Fangio is going to end up in Philly. Actually, it may be official today. I don't know, but that's going to happen.
Probably. Yeah.
Vic Fangio is going to be the new DC for Philly. But I think that Vic Fangio probably realizes he's never going to be a head coach again. He had a chance, didn't work out. He's still a very highly coveted coordinator.
Right.
But that's what he is, you know, and for some guys, that's okay. You know, it's okay to be like a really good coordinator. It doesn't mean that you're not a good coach. It just means that you've got your, you know what you're good at. And I mean, Brandon Staley's a shining example. I would hire Brandon Staley to be my DC. I still think he's a smart guy. I just don't want Brandon Staley making the final decisions for a football team. When it comes to that, he's an idiot.
Well,
so
But you know, you and I have talked about this for all the years we've been together. I want guys, if I'm a head coach, I want guys who got hired as head coaches because they were great coordinators, but they sucked as head coaches. I want those guys as a head coach because I can bounce off. They got hired because they were great coordinators.
Yeah. So you want Dan Quinn as your DC?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anytime. And I think that's how you, like, we were talking about this last week. If I got a head coaching job, I'd want Arthur Smith as my offensive coordinator. You know, guy was great and sucked as a head coach, but he was okay. I mean, he wasn't horrible, but.
Well, I mean, like Jim Schwartz is a great example. I think Jim Schwartz.
Perfect example, yeah.
Jim Schwartz might be the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, and he's done it at several different spots. Like he's been an elite defensive coordinator, and he was a head coach, and he just wasn't that good. But I mean, if I could, I mean, he did it in Buffalo, he did it in Philly, he's doing it in Cleveland now. He is elite wherever he goes. I mean, he did it in Baltimore before he was even like the DC. He was just like a position coach.
Right.
And he is elite. Tennessee, the other place where he was. But when he went to Detroit, he wasn't that. And that's okay. Like he's still clearly he coached one of the best defenses in the NFL this year. But he was like 35% as an NFL head coach, which not your thing. Right. That's okay. And really what being a head coach in the NFL about is, like, D'Amico Ryans is probably a great example of this. It's not about always like how much what you can do on the whiteboard and X's and O's and shit. It's about leading men and being willing to surround yourself with guys who understand the X's and O's better than you. And
Right.
if you're not willing to hire guys who know more about the X's and O's than you, unless you're Bill Belichick, like, you're probably not doing yourself any favors. Like Bill Belichick, it's hard for guys like Bill Belichick to find people who understand football better than him to work on his staff because they don't
Right.
exist.
Right.
But but if you're just a Joe Schmo coach, like, I mean, not to call D'Amico a Joe Schmo coach, but he's surrounding himself with people who understand the game better than he does, from at least how to coach the game better than he understands it. And that's great. That's a good thing. If you can be the leader of men, Mike Tomlin, another guy who's done this his whole career. Mike Tomlin's not some genius X and O guy, but Mike Tomlin's had a lot of success in this league because he's a leader of men and he's always surrounded himself with other good coaches. And that's really what your goal should be.
And I've always believed in that, and not just surround yourself with good coaches, but surround yourself, and like even when we were doing the show, and in everything I've done, surround yourself with people who will challenge you. And that's one of the things that made our show great, is we challenged each other on stuff. I mean, we almost always agreed on things, but when we didn't, it's like, no, I have a different
perspective. When we didn't, I was right, and that was okay.
Once or twice, maybe. But no, but the truth is, we both welcome that, right? And that's how you succeed in anything. You can't just be, oh, I'm right about everything. I mean, you could do that, but not me. And so I've always surrounded myself with good people who think differently than I do. And in the end, I make the decision, right? And, now it was different with what we were doing because we always made the decisions together. But when we were working with Eric, when we were working with Jong, and those guys would have ideas that you and I hadn't thought of, and we just kind of look at each other like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Let's do this.
Yeah.
You need different perspectives, especially in coaching. I mean, everybody thinks it's all, it's my way or the highway. And it's that way with Belichick. But really good coaches get people who not only have ideas, but challenge them.
Yep.
Okay, so I wanted to get something that Lamont brought something up earlier. Mike Vrabel's the opposite. Good head coach, awful DC. People forget that Vrabel.
I think that's true.
No, it's absolutely 100% true. He was terrible in his 1 year as a DC, and his play calling was awful. But he's a really good head coach. And
agreed.
I think, and again, he's also smart enough to hire the right people. And he always, and like I said, he never had the same success after Artie went to Atlanta, but he
also had Ryan Tannehill and Will Levis.
Yeah. I mean, oh God, Will Levis is such a disaster. But a lot of people weighing in on how 97.5 went downhill after the blitz. Guys, don't blame them for that. Look, they're good people. And at the risk of sounding arrogant, there wasn't a show like ours that was ever going to come in there and do the same thing. I mean, well, okay, that does sound arrogant, but it's the truth. I mean, we did something different, and we had different ideas from the beginning, and that's what made it work. And they wanted to go more traditional, and that's fine, but they were never going to match what AJ and I did, and mostly AJ. I'll take 42% of the credit and give AJ 58. But the truth is,
I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, no, what we did worked because we're both smart, fun guys who, and I hate to tell you, most people in radio are just not very smart. I really hate to break that to you. AJ is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and that. But yeah, but the reality is,
key is smart, but making people think you're not that smart.
Oh yeah,
that's the move.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm good at that because I'm not that smart. But Actually, there's some things I'm very smart at. When it comes to relationships, a friend of mine called me this the
No.
other day. She says, "You're the dumbest smart person I've ever met." I'm kind of like,
Yeah, relationships not your strong point.
well, you know what? Give me some time. I like where this one is headed. But all right, so
Oh
let's talk.
Jesus, that sounds terrible.
All right, let's talk 49ers Lions before I get into this and you make fun of me. But I will say this: I'm hoping to come out in March, and assuming the court will allow it, I'd like to bring her with me.
Listen, if she has to stay on the porch, I can't have a felon in my house. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I mean, probation. She got probation.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That'd be great. Hey, I'll introduce her to Annie while she wears her ankle monitor.
She doesn't have to wear an ankle monitor, but
Oh, okay.
maybe. Anyway, all right. So let's talk 49ers Lions. I don't want to get into this too much because she's still in rehab. When she gets out of rehab and is actually able to listen, then I could probably make more fun of this situation. But yeah, you guys can always make fun of me. All right, your thoughts on 49ers Lions?
Yeah, again, feels kind of chalky, but I certainly lean to San Francisco here. The Lions haven't won a road game outside since week 6 in Tampa. They've played 2 games outside since then. They lost 38-6 to Baltimore and 28-13 to the Bears. So like the Ravens lost, you say, okay, you put up 6 points. The Bears, you only put up 13 points. The Goff indoor-outdoor splits, we've talked about before. They're easy to find on the internet. He's dreadful outdoors, and the weather's going to be okay. I don't know that it really matters though. The Lions defensively, they are bottom 10 in yards after catch allowed, bottom 5 in missed tackles. You know when the worst team you can possibly play when you give up a lot of yards after catch and you miss a lot of tackles is the 49ers.
Yep.
George Kittle, he's a yak monster. All he does is catch the ball and go for extra yards. McCaffrey, number 1 in the league for running backs, yards after first contact. So if you miss tackles, the 49ers absolutely punish you.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they do that in this game. That said, I think the 49ers, what they saw last week out of Brock Purdy, probably scared them a little. You didn't see the best performance by him. They're probably a little nervous that he could cost them a game. I think you're going to see a conservative game plan. And even though the Lions are very good against the run, the 49ers aren't going to not run the ball. They're going to run the ball, and clock's going to tick, tick, tick. And as far as the Lions, they're going to have to run the ball to stay in the game. The Niners are an elite pass defense, very susceptible to the run. I think when you add that in, you add in the outdoor elements, and you add in that the Niners are the slowest team in the league in seconds per play, I think we're looking at an under here. So I 100% think this is a low-scoring game.
Yeah.
And I narrowed it down even further because my concern would be the Niners just blow up on them. But I think I'm gonna play the Lions team total under 21.5 and just kind of pick out the Lions specifically. I feel like that's the best way to get at this game. I don't think the Lions are going to score 4 touchdowns in this game. I think the Niners are going to ball control, and they're gonna be a conservative offense but effective because that's what they've been all season long. They're not looking for, especially without Debo. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have no idea if Debo's going to play or not.
Right.
But I will say this: if Debo does play, he's not going to be 100%. So things are going to be more tame than they normally are. And when they don't have Debo, it makes sense for them to be more conservative than ever. So I expect that sort of a game plan from the 49ers because I don't know if Kyle Shanahan's certain today. Like if you put a gun to Kyle Shanahan and said, hey, is Debo playing on Sunday? I don't know that he can answer that question. Like I think it's really like a wait and see thing. So I think they have to game plan like they're not going to have him. And if they're game planning like they're not going to have him, that means they are going to be super conservative. It's going to be the Christian McCaffrey show, and understanding it might not be his most efficient or effective game because Detroit, again, really good against the run. Although last week Rachaad White had some success running on Tampa. So if he can, then you know what's going to happen with McCaffrey. But I think that they control clock. I think this is an under game, but more specifically, I think the Lions go under. I look at Goff's under yardage too. I think that because, like I said, for the Lions to succeed, they have to run the ball. Goff's 258.5 passing yards. Outside Goff, you have to throw for 260 to beat me. I feel like I like that bet.
The only thing I would take on
Ruh-roh.
Maybe Gibbs over rushing yards.
Yeah, I like that.
I would look at that, yeah.
You know what I like more than that? Gibbs over rushing attempts. Because even if he doesn't have the success, they're not going to stop trying. They're going to force feed him, and which makes sense. But you know what? Aaron Jones had a good game last week against 49ers. Like maybe yards would work. The only concern would be they've got sort of a split backfield thing now. I do think Gibbs is the more featured guy. But yeah, I don't believe in this Lions defense. The truth is the Lions should have lost to the Rams. The Rams outplayed the Lions, and they moved on anyway.
Yeah,
and then
we were both on the Rams last week too, and I don't apologize for that. I was on the right end. It just didn't work out.
And then the Lions, I mean, they beat Tampa last week. Tampa was probably the worst team that made the playoffs. Tampa or Pittsburgh. Like, I mean, they were. It was a below average team. Tampa was, and they were all out to beat them. So I'm just not convinced on this Lions team. I think they are it's not like I'm making some big statement here. I think they're the worst team left in the playoffs, but I don't think it's particularly close. I think like they're the one thing that doesn't really belong. And I'm not going to – I think what people are doing here, the people who are trying to find a way to justify taking the Lions here are using a really short sample size and saying, well, the Niners struggled last week. Okay, it's one game. Like the Niners have just beat the shit out of everybody at home all season long.
Yeah.
So they have one bad game when it's raining, and we're like, oh, 49ers are no good now. Let's not overreact to one data point.
Yeah,
it was one game.
There's a lot of games in Cleveland that go that way, right? I mean, you get crappy weather, and you know we see a lot of good teams look like shit there. So.
Yeah, but I mean, 49ers, it's like. You can't let one bad Purdy game make you. And this is what's crazy. People are acting like Purdy now is just no good. They're like, oh, yep, Lions have a quarterback edge in this game. Like 6 weeks ago, Brock Purdy was the favorite to be the MVP of the National Football League.
Yeah.
And now people are saying Jared Goff has he's got the advantage. Outdoor Jared Goff is now better than Brock Purdy. What? How the hell did we get to that? So I think there's just a quick overreaction, and I think I get it because a lot of people are watching these games for the first time. A lot of people are casual, who I only watch the playoffs or whatever, and I'm that way with some sports too. I get it. I don't watch baseball every single night, but I think that people are just kind of making a rash overreaction to a small sample size.
All right, so before we put a bow on this, so one thing I want to mention, you and I have watched Brock Purdy back to his Iowa State days. He's always been the same guy. He would hand the ball off to Breece Hall, and he had one great receiver that he'd throw the ball to, but he didn't make a lot of mistakes, and he's still the same guy. I think he makes more plays than he did in college, but, he's not a guy who – the 4-interception game was just an anomaly, right? That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you can win with that. I mean, guys like that you can win with because he's not he's not Trent Dilfer. He's better than Trent Dilfer. And they've got the team around him. So I like the Niners here a lot. I think it's going to be Niners-Ravens, and I'm going to bet Ravens with every part of my soul unless Lamar Jackson gets hurt. And
I think I'm with you.
In the end, that's what I'm down to.
Said says 5 playoff wins for Goff, 1 for Purdy. Purdy had 2 last year, and won this. So Purdy's got 3. He's been in the league for 2 years and he's got 3 playoff wins. Like Jared Goff, I mean, the Rams got rid of Jared Goff because they saw his limits. They knew they couldn't win with him, and they moved on. And they made the right call because they won a Super Bowl. I just don't think, especially outdoor golf, I just want nothing to do with the guy. Like I think he's not shitty. He's just not.
No,
he's not good. He's not good enough to make up for the gap between the rest of the 49ers roster and the Lions roster. And also, I don't mean to sound, I'm not hating on Dan Campbell. I think he's a pretty good coach. I mean, he's far and away the least qualified coach left in these 4 teams. Like, you got 3 guys who are probably going to end up being Hall of Famers eventually, and then you've got Dan Campbell. So
you got
I expect Shanahan to just coach circles around this dude.
Well, Shanahan was a UT guy.
I didn't consider that this was a Longhorn versus Aggie matchup in the coaching department. I didn't consider that until just now.
But yeah, I mean, I love Dan Campbell, but he's kind of your typical Aggie. So Lamont was asking this earlier, and by the way, guys, thanks to all of you for showing up today. Nothing but love for every. I hope you've gotten some good information because AJ was always great, but man, since he's been at pregame, he's gone like next level with his gambling information. Which, but first off, tell him where.
Thank you, sir.
Also, just give him some.
I lost you for a second, Freddie.
Sorry, I had to order another drink there. Sorry.
Oh, well, I didn't hear. I lost your internet for a second.
No. What I was saying was, after I was praising you for you've gone next level on your football stuff, but what college basketball you got coming up? Lamont was asking where you can get it. Please tell him what you're doing on pregame.
Yeah, so I've got packages available at pregame.com, like season-long packages. Sometimes I have daily packages. Mostly I put up season-long stuff. That's where I put all my UFC picks, where I put all my college basketball picks. Like today, I've got 5 college basketball games going. The only one I've got going currently is Central Connecticut against Fairleigh Dickinson. I've got Central Connecticut -1, and it looks like they're up 15 in the second half. So we're in good shape there. But yeah, everything you can find at pregame.com. And obviously, like, I give out a lot of stuff on the Dream Pod. I do a college basketball podcast twice a week, and give out picks there. I do a UFC pod before every pay-per-view and give out some picks there. And then I usually try to give out some picks on Straight Out of Vegas AM when I can. So if you aren't, please subscribe to RJ Bell's Dream Preview and subscribe to Straight Out of Vegas AM. And if you can, if you're willing, give a 5-star review and say nice things about me, man. That's always good for business. And so check them out. Straight Out of Vegas AM, wherever you get your podcast. But Apple's my preferred place for you to leave a 5-star.
And the truth is, like, that AM podcast is on our time frame here in Houston, right?
So we release it at 5 a.m. Pacific or 5 a.m. Eastern time. So it's like I'm up in the middle of the night every night doing that damn show. So but it hits you guys at 6 a.m. your time. So basically, when you wake up, if Houston radio is shitty, or not just that, but if you're looking for gambling related content, gambling focused content to start your day, or you're like, hey, what bet should I make? What are the lines today? That's what we try to do. We try to present it in a way that if you're looking to make bets, that's the place to go to get some advice.
Yeah, plus it's AJ, right? So if you're a fan of AJ,
plus it's me.
There you go. Yeah. So B. Hannon was asking Cougs K-State, AJ, who you got? I have missed one UH game all year, and it's usually at home. I don't care what the spread is. they're going to cover. On the road, they're not. I mean, it's just that simple.
I think it is that simple. And Kansas State is a team that I'm generally looking to fade. So that's the way I mean, it's looking like it's probably going to be 17, 18 points. It's going to be a massive number. Personally, I hope that they blow them out, because then I think you're going to get some juicy numbers against Texas and Kansas on the road, and I think those are the places where
right.
UH
you
might
go
be
the other way.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely.
And I talked about this. The new Big 12 teams, when they go on the road, are going to struggle. And Houston just got a win at BYU. And granted, it was a 7-point win. It probably shouldn't have been a 7-point win. It was a lot closer game than the final score said. But that's also, that BYU trip is not a typical Big 12 venue. It's these places like going to Manhattan, which I think they avoid this year, which is probably a good thing.
We've talked about this forever. That's one of the worst trips. That in West Virginia. Yeah.
And Iowa State. Like, I mean, these are tough places to go play. And like when they go to Baylor later this year, like I think Houston's really, really good. KenPom has them projected to win every game on their schedule. But I think like when they go
happening in this conference. Yeah.
I don't think so, man. Like they're going to be probably a 4 or 5 point favorite at Kansas. They'll be a 4 or 5 point favorite at Baylor. They might be close to a double-digit favorite at Oklahoma late in the season.
They could
These
lose
are dangerous spots for UH.
Yeah.
They could absolutely lose those games. So just be careful. Like I'm with you, Freddie, and I generally think that at home they can name their number, and that's probably the case on Saturday.
Yeah.
But just be careful of like saying, oh, they can't lose. They're just so. I mean, we've seen it. We saw them at Iowa State and TCU, and it's not like they got blown out in either one of those games. But these are the types of road trips that are a lot tougher than anything they were seeing in the AAC.
Oh God, there's no Tulsas on this schedule.
No, going to Fog is like that. Is if you're not used to that kind of a trip, it's gonna open your eyes, man. So just be. I agree with you, Fred. I'm fine backing UH at home. If anything, my first thought is to fade them on the road.
Yeah, you know what? I hammered UCF the other night after UH crushed them, and West Virginia was coming off the big win, and then West Virginia goes to UCF, and I'm like, oh, this is all about UCF, man. And I hammered it. I just like, I mean, it really feels very predictable.
I really think for all 4 of those new teams, Central Florida, Cincinnati, UH, and BYU, if you just generally say, I like them at home, I want to fade them on the road. As long as they're not playing each other, it's been very, very profitable. So there's been a couple spots where it's been like Central Florida beating Texas at Texas was a surprise.
Yeah,
and you're going to get that coming. You're going to get those sometimes, but I also don't think this Texas team is very good. I think they probably have buyer's remorse on Rodney Terry, which I pretty much predicted when they hired him. But
they're probably an 8 seed,
Yeah, it's probably they'll sneak into the tournament, but they're just not very good. But yeah, I think generally take those 4 teams, look to back them at home and fade them on the road.
All right, AJ, always a pleasure, man. I love you, brother. I have so much fun doing this podcast with you, and just always wish you all the best. And one of these days somebody's going to be smart and hire us, and we're going to do a radio show together.
Maybe so, bro.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Always, man. Take care.
All right. Okay, guys, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for joining. I love all of you. I really do. I appreciate you. It's funny. As shitty as this year has been, it's having you guys has meant so much. And being able to interact and just, us be us. I can't thank you enough. So I'm going to wrap it up today, and I'll be back on Monday. I don't know where I'll be or who will be on, but I love you guys. And until Monday, stay sportsy, Gulf Coast badasses.